Hey, hi, hello, Superdude here, making a video that's breaching into a new medium of entertainment because I saw James Gunn's Superman the other day, and I was really surprised by it. I hadn't looked up anything beforehand, I have seen no trailers, but I was looking forward to seeing what this rebooted Superman does with the character, and it made me feel a lot of things, gang. That's my recommendation in a nutshell. I thought it was very good. 6 out of 7, I felt things. Go watch it if I finish this video before it's out of theaters. But in seeing this movie, both during the viewing experience and in the days that followed, I've been thinking a lot about the character archetype of the Paragon and why they matter. For those outside the know, the quintessential Paragon is someone who has a raw, uncompromising ideal that defines every fiber of their being. Think Paladin from Dungeons & Dragons, a character who has access to incredible holy magics not because they studied hard, followed a god, or whatever the druid is doing, but because they believed in something so strongly that the world bends to their force of charisma. Paragons are shining beacons of morality and goodness in their stories, and they influence the world through their connection with others. They inspire others to be better people, perhaps even rehabilitating evil characters through the sheer force of their belief in what's right. And that's really all it takes to be a Paragon. Be good, inspire others. That doesn't mean they're perfect, and that doesn't mean that they can't be corrupted and become evil themselves, but as long as they inspire, you've got yourself a Paragon. The best Paragons aren't just an inspiration to the characters in the story though, but to the people watching as well. I can tell you firsthand that watching Avatar: The Last Airbender growing up has forever affected my feelings on war and violence. I'm sure a whole generation of people who watched that show internalized its anti-war messaging in some way, and it's easy to see why, with such well-written characters and a story that's allowed to take itself and its audience seriously. For the longest time, this was the pinnacle of animated storytelling for kids, in the global west in my opinion, and that sort of once-in-a-lifetime show that I was actually present for as it was running, it sticks with you. But perhaps the most enduring and well-known character under this trope, the Paragon of Paragons, is Superman. Although not the first superhero ever made, he was certainly the most influential and the strongest, using his incredible powers to do the most good he possibly can, and in the process inspiring a plethora of other superheroes in fiction and authors and artists out of fiction, inspiring this honestly insane superhero landscape we find ourselves within currently. I think it's fair to say, this is a pretty important character. But why Superman? There were others before him, so what is it about this Midwest-ass farm boy who's strong enough to do anything so inspirational? Why did history bend around this guy specifically? To explore this idea, let's do the obvious and talk a bit about James Gunn's take on Superman and how this version of the character represents the tenets of the Paragon and attempts to recapture Superman's magic in a world that could really use a hero like him. Now, there are a few groups of people out there that have monopolized the conversation around this movie in such a way as to be elephants in the room, so let me address them now. First off, this movie is a bit political. Gunn has described his film as a refugee story in press junkets, and that has had the effect of turning this movie into a chess piece in the culture war, which I'm sure was partially the goal. Virtue signal to your liberal audience, who's more likely to see the movie now, and piss off the conservatives with one of their trigger words so that they talk about it over and over and over and over and over and over, which turns into sales because tickets bought out of hate are still tickets. No such thing as bad press, everybody. Still, the movie itself does have a message which is unfortunately considered political, and the major plot is definitely commenting on the state of our world, which I will get into later, but I promise you, the movie is only kind of more political than anything you ever watch. Everything has a worldview, which means every piece of media you've ever seen has a belief on how people should act, even something as innocuous and simplistic, supposedly, as children's cartoons. The aforementioned Avatar: The Last Airbender is staunchly anti-war and pacifist. Most shonen anime believe that evil people can be rehabilitated through love, nurturing, and acceptance. SpongeBob has multiple episodes talking about environmental consciousness, workers' rights, treating people who are different from you with kindness. Again, I must stress, everything has a belief on how things ought to be, and therefore an opinion on policy, how laws or societal expectations inform how we ought to act. Superman's no different. We've just not seen a Superman like this put to film in a long time. But we'll get back to that in a bit. I'm done beating around the bush. Let's actually talk about the movie, okay? Superman 2025 starts right in the middle of everything, skipping the origin story and the establishment of villains and character dynamics so we can just start running, which is a solid choice in a world that's been receiving superhero movies uninterrupted for over 2 decades now. But if you jumped into the Superman reboot not actually knowing anything about Superman, which is reasonable, don't worry. We'll eventually get around to touching everything that matters for this version of the character. His various personas, his family, his friends, and his enemies, the pieces are scattered throughout the movie so that we can begin with some excitement, rather than nearly an hour of setup with little Clark in Kansas learning what it means to be human, all that jazz. It's been done before, and skipping that to get to what's strictly new or important to this character is one of this movie's strengths. It's certainly not a short movie, but much like the Batman from a few years back, I'm not sure what you could cut from this. Everything serves the whole in some way. Leaving the script a moment so that I can talk off the cuff. Oftentimes, what I've just described as a strength is considered a detriment in reviews. A lot of people talk about how, without no proper setup, no proper origin, it kind of feels like the movie's throwing you all over the place, and that didn't bother me. I think that has something to do with the fact that I play a lot of video games, and superhero video games oftentimes have multiple side quests, multiple villains, all happening inside of a relatively short span of time. Think about how every Batman Arkham game is technically happening inside of one night. Being stretched thin is what it means to be a superhero in video games, so doing that in this movie didn't feel weird to me at all, but I know that that's specific to me. I personally considered that frenetic pace a plus. Returning to the script, the central thesis of Superman 2025 is that this character, Superman, doesn't really make sense in the modern context. His worldview is too simplistic for our modern complexities. It's just too hard to know what the right thing to do is anymore. It isn't as simple as saving someone. We have to consider our political institutions, how Superman represents America as much as himself, and how he can't just take power into his own hands because he may go against the will of the nation or cause completely new international conflicts through his meddling. Superman is too powerful, and yet also too naive and idealistic. His smoke too tough, his swag too different, and his meddling will kill us all. What we must understand about Superman is that he's a character that is nearly a century old. A lot of people have taken a crack at the character, so there are a myriad different things that your Superman can be. This version of the character, played by David Corenswet, is harkening back to the Silver Age era of comics, an era defined by the establishment of the Comic Code Authority, an agency that regulated what sort of content comic books were allowed to depict, put into place by those very companies making the comic books, all because there was a lot of milk being spilled at the time over comics causing violence among children. Some things never change. Did you know that the Greek philosopher Plato once described books, although he called it poetry, as corrupting to our souls? We as a species have always feared that which is new, whether comics, video games, or literally the printed word. Anyway, this self-regulation greatly reduced what authors could write about or even make reference to, which inevitably led to campier, goofier, more presentable comics made to produce a squeaky clean image that absolutely no one would object to. And it is that corniness that we see here. Clark rarely cusses, and certainly never does in the suit. There are playful inclusions of some of Superman's sillier tools, such as the Superman robots, the hypno glasses, and of course, Krypto. This character is harkening back to an older time, a time when morality was comparatively simpler. Or at least that's the implication. Remember when baby time and you didn't have to think about taxes or genocide? We imagine the past to be less complicated because we were naive, not because it actually was. Remember, the Silver Age is an age of paranoid self-censorship for comic books, but that's not how we remember these stories. Our world is complicated. Superman isn't, and pulling in aspects of the character from over half a century ago stresses that fact to the audience. Throughout the movie, we see Superman grate against the jaded nature of the modern day. Superman intervenes in a Middle Eastern invasion before the movie truly begins, and Lois presses him hard for his supposed lack of foresight on the consequences of his actions. And though it is a long and involved back and forth, Superman ends that argument with an exasperated, "People were going to die!" which we will be talking about more later. It's that simple. Someone was aggressing on someone else, and that's all it takes. Who cares if he's an American and they're from metaphorical persecuted country? It is the persecution that matters. He can do something, so he does. And every fight in the movie demonstrates this belief through action. Superman only goes for the perfect win condition in every fight, because anything less than that is failure. And yes, this does lead to Superman getting himself into some massive trouble for the smallest wins possible. He takes time out of his kaiju fight to save a squirrel, for God's sake. There is no life so small as to be meaningless to Clark Kent, which is what makes Superman the paragon. Superman will fight a kaiju and save your baby and ask if everyone's alright, all the while trying to consider how he can actually relocate and save this very kaiju because he's the strongest superhero. It would be simple, effortless even, for him to turn this monster into a paste. But he wants to do the right thing, not the easy thing. Perfection is something no one can achieve. It's an ideal rather than a true goal. But if anyone could do it, it would be Superman. And it's about the only way you can put him in real danger. Every encounter in this movie shows Superman stretching himself to the breaking point, fighting on multiple fronts, juggling multiple problems, all the while saving babies and squirrels and saying things like, golly gosh, gee whiz, because anything less than that is less than Clark's best, and he's not willing to compromise on what Superman's best is. And that inspires others to strive for their best as well, to stand up and fight for the truth, to save their friends, or to save the world when the moment might call for it. Metropolis and its citizens begin this movie closed off, self-centered, and jaded to the machinations of those in power. Lex Luthor can do literally whatever he wants, even bending the laws of time and space, and the world stage is all too happy to let him do so. But thanks to Clark, thanks to his kindness and faith in humanity, others come to his side. The movie begins with Lex unchecked and a genocidal war mounting in some far-off land, and neither of those problems can be solved by Superman alone. In fact, the combination of those two events unravels him, and he is stripped of his power and influence to rot in some kryptonite-laden prison forever. He manages to escape, but only because people chose to believe in him. People he's helped before, and people he continues to help from within his personal hell. He's battered and at his lowest, but even at the bottom, Superman inspires others. This version of Superman absolutely understands the core of the character as the paragon of paragons. In a world he doesn't come from, and with people questioning if he even belongs here, he actively expresses his faith, kindness, love, and generosity to all of Earth's creatures. And he slowly convinces superheroes and citizens alike to join his cause and fight back against envy personified. A cult of money which stands as an equal and opposite influence towards ignorance. If Superman encourages you to be a better you, it is plain to see that Lex Luthor's cast of sycophantic followers are encouraged not to change, not to think for themselves. They uplift the fruits of one man, dedicating all of their time and manpower to Lex Luthor's vision. They replace their morality with his. And outside of some resistance here or there, they never outright oppose nor question him. Nicholas Hoult does a fantastic job in this role, being a borderline ridiculous and obsessive performance of the character, which pairs well with the tone, very Saturday morning cartoon villain. But Lex's entourage is just as important to understanding the dangers and strength of Lex Luthor. It's impressive when you think about it. You don't often get to look at the producers or engineers behind a project, just the front man. But Superman 2025 knows that Lex's ideas don't happen without talented scientists and engineers to back him up. This movie takes a jab at great man theory across the board. Superman may be the best of us, but he is saved multiple times by his friends and allies, and Lex Luthor is never seen without his corporate goons flanking him. They are as much a part of the character as he is, and they demonstrate well the corrupting influence of money. I mean, just look at how many allies Superman has versus Lex. Being good is its own reward, but Lex Luthor is offering money, and we all need money to live. Anyway, with all this talk of being a paragon, Superman 2025 does have a direct target for its ire. The central plot of the movie revolves around the fictional country of Bearrista, a nation of the Middle East invading and taking the fictional nation of Jarhanpur for themselves. There's more to it than that, but these are the broad strokes. And we keep returning to Bearrista throughout the movie to see a militarized nation preparing to attack the vastly outgunned Jarhanpurians. In the third act, Bearrista makes good on their promise and begins to invade Jarhanpur as children hold aloft a flag to Superman, hoping he will once again fly in and save their lives. This is the political message of the movie. If this image looks wrong to you, if it upsets you, if you think it's wrong or even evil to draw a gun on a child, then you think what the Bearristians are doing is wrong, right? And even though America is allies with Bearrista, it's still an evil thing to do and they should be stopped. And if, say, some billionaires were involved and invested in the conflict, maybe they should also be stopped? So, I don't think it's hard to see that this is about Israel and Palestine, right? This movie is talking about Israel and Palestine, and that's the real reason why this movie has become a political hot potato. It's not particularly subtle. Superman is not a subtle character, so conservative talking heads noticed and went on the offensive. With this information, we could reframe this movie's plot as the Gaza War if Superman were real. And in asking this question, we return to a type of Superman we haven't seen in a long time. Superman was originally created in 1938 by two Jewish men on the brink of World War II. And though it's easy to think of anti-Semitism during the time of the World Wars as a specifically German problem, American Jewish sentiment was pretty terrible during the period as well, and really only improved in opposition to the Axis powers, to prove that the US was better than her enemies. Superman, then, was created during the Great Depression as the world was on the brink of a devastating war of ideology against fascism, and this character was in obvious opposition to all of that. A good man who does the right thing, no matter what, not for any reward or virtue, but simply because it is the right thing to do. In a time of unprecedented, global uncertainty, Superman was a beacon of hope, something to aspire to, and hold on to the belief that there are good people out there who are working to fix the world and make life better for everyone in it. And now, nearly 90 years later, comic books have produced some of the most lucrative and widespread cultural artifacts of the modern day, and we find ourselves in a very similar state of the world. Fascism's on the rise again, likely because populist movements always grow more powerful during times of great inequality and uncertainty, and the income disparity does rival the Great Depression, even surpasses it by some metrics. People work really hard for not a lot. Companies announce huge profits while laying people off. Art-based jobs seem to be exploding everywhere, not to mention the sword of Damocles that hangs over us all in the form of climate change. And, oh right, a war in the Middle East where one of the US's allies fights a battle against a much smaller, poorer nation, and with higher concentrations of child deaths over the past year than any conflict of the 21st century. We live in worsening times, and sometimes I feel insane for how much my government chose to do nothing, say so very little, and then we voted in a guy who would obviously do nothing to help. And in this current climate, James Gunn et al. Decided to bring Superman back to his idealistic roots. For nearly a decade now, we've been entertaining the notion of a dark or even evil Superman in film. Snyder's DCU is heavily invested in exploring Superman's role in our real-world society, as Lois attempts to in 2025 Superman. Snyder's Clark is a bit tortured, brutal, scary, and a direct allegory for God. As a result, this Superman's no paragon. He's almost more of an eldritch horror in this continuity, as the might of God is too terrifying for humans to witness, and people fear what he's capable of. As superhero movies lost their novelty and became commonplace, what with the rise of the MCU, Amazon adapted multiple stories that take different angles on an evil Superman. Even in games, a genuinely virtuous Superman hasn't been seen in a long time. We are at a dark moment in history, and in response, Superman is asked to be earnest once again, with a movie that's aware of how silly this can all be, but is still earnest, equal parts ironic and sincere in a very meta-modern way, and I adore it for that. We don't live in the 50s anymore, and we shouldn't try to return to it, but that doesn't mean every lesson from the past is worth forgetting. We could take that corny, earnest past into our ironic and uncertain future, and make something that's the best of both paradigms. That is the essence of metamodernism. If you found yourself bristling during the movie when you realized it was about Palestine, or a few minutes ago when I finally said it plain, remember what Superman said in his interview with Lois Lane. Sociopolitics don't matter. It doesn't matter who started it. The problem is that people are dying who never did anything wrong, and that shouldn't be allowed to pass. If Superman were real, he would do everything in his power to stop the violence. And then, of course, we'd have to talk about the near century of bad blood and escalating tensions between Palestine and Israel, but I have an engineering degree. I am not even remotely equipped with the knowledge or ability to figure out a solution, and I'm certainly not going to find that solution by spouting my thoughts on YouTube. I desperately wish that some amazing people out there could come along and provide that peaceful solution, which is the source of my most bitter takeaway from this movie. As the soldier aimed his rifle at a child, I felt my blood turn to acid. But when the child was saved, there was no relief. Without spoiling exactly what happens, Shah Rampur is saved that day, And all I could feel was an extraordinary bitterness, because as nice as this is to look at, Superman ain't real. And the child that this actor is a metaphor for wasn't so lucky thousands of times over. We need Superman back in the world, and I think this movie does an exceptional job being what we need. A cry for people to wake up and realize that kindness really is the most punk rock of all. I so badly want that cry to be heard by everyone and not warped by a veil of politics. And admittedly, the movie isn't doing itself any favors in that department, but Superman's villain has been an uber-rich bald guy for decades and decades. It should have been obvious what Superman's politics were from the start. Money is the source of a great deal of evil. It's not that Superman's woke now, it's that some people have been convinced that empathy and thinking are bad and caring makes you weak. It's not weak to care. Evil is banal and easy. It requires nothing of you to go about your day thinking of no one but yourself. Superman's greatest strength is how hard he tries to do the most good he can. And that's a power all of us have. So no matter how powerful we individually are, we could always put more good into the world. So as I said in my last video about politics, you must fight to live in the world you want to live in. Superman won't save Gaza, or Ukraine, or any number of other worldwide catastrophes known and unknown, because he's a fictional character. But we can try our best to change the world ourselves, just as he does. It takes a lot of effort, and a lot of people doing the hard thing, but if Superman tries his best, even when it would be so easy to falter, then by God, I can too, and so can you. Just as I did last time, I will link a Google Doc compiled by FD Signifier that details ways to affect your local community that isn't just voting or protesting, and I hope that this was inspiring to you in some way. I am Superdude. Thank you for watching. Whew, that was more challenging than I thought it was going to be. Editing a video out of only 4-ish minutes of trailer footage is not easy, gang. Hopefully the finished product was okay, visually speaking. Again, I thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this, consider becoming a patron or leaving a tip on Ko-Fi if subscriptions aren't your thing. Doing so helps me continue to do this sort of work and put your donation back into making this video process better, hopefully. I currently have a lot of script ideas, and I'm thinking about adding a live action element to what's coming, and that was made possible through patron donations, so thank you very much. Outside of that, I hope to see you again soon with a video that definitely won't be political like this one was. That's a lie. But I have a suspicion it'll be way less polarizing than this topic tends to be, so look forward to that. Otherwise, whether you love me, hate me, or in between me, feel free to leave a comment. I do read those, and try to have a good day. And, of course, remember what I said in the video. Try to put some good in the world, okay? I am Superdude, and I'll see you around. Love you, see you, bye!